Welcome to Heresy, the Horus Heresy talk show. In this video, we are going to be looking at the fast attack units for the Solar Auxilia in Horus Heresy, the Age of Darkness. This is part 5 of a multi-part series going through all the Solar Auxilia books, so make sure to check out the other episodes on this book as well. We're going to be talking about the Arvus Transport, the Primaris-Lightning, and the Thunderbolt options in this video. But before we do that, if you enjoy the content, please do leave me a like and subscribe, and don't forget to leave me any comments in the comments down below, and join us on Discord as well, which is linked in the video description. And now, on with the show. The first of the 3 options in fast attack is actually a transport, the Arvus Transport, so it's 75 points, it moves 20 inches, it's got 11, 11, 10 armor and 2 hit points, it can hover, so it doesn't have to zoom, and it's got a transport capacity of 12. Because it's a flyer, it can deep strike, and it has to deep strike indeed. So this is pretty much sort of like a flying expensive Rhino or Aurochs. Now 75 points for a flying transport, even if it's got 2 hit points, is pretty good, really. I would say, if you had this in Space Marine armies, you'd probably consider cool stuff that you can do with it. What this unit does have that's interesting is searchlights. Now, as written, searchlights work when you shoot at something, and this vehicle's got no guns. So the searchlights on this vehicle don't work, and that is just the start of the bad writing in this section of the book. It's kind of disappointing to see things like this added. Obviously, the person who's designed this has said, this model's got searchlights on it, that's cool, let's give them some searchlights, but don't know how the rule works. And, for the points we pay for these books, that's not really good. It's not a big deal, it's not materially changing the unit a lot, it's just kind of disappointing to see that the people creating the unit aren't even doing basic checks on the work and possibly don't even know the rules that they're working with. Disappointing. Can't highlight that enough. For the money we pay for these books, should be better. Now, it is an interesting option, this Arvus Transport, as I've said, but the problem with it is, even at only 75 points, which isn't that bad for what it doesn't really have a lot worth transporting. In theory, it could take some units of companions with melter guns, maybe, although you could also do that in an Aurochs. It could also take some melee units, but it's not an assault transport, so they'd have to get out and take a round of shooting before they got to fight. And it's also got the problem that when it turns up, it's going to get shot by interceptor as well, unless you've got multiple flyers on the board. So it can carry Velataris in the Solar pattern cohort and their line in that as well, which is kind of interesting, like dropping some line troops off on objectives. You would probably want like 3 or more of these doing that so they don't get blown up by interceptor. And if you did have all them doing that, you're taking lots of Velataris, which, as we talked about in the Elite review, aren't actually great troops. So really, I don't see a lot of use for this. I think outside of fun or interesting lists, I don't really think there's any good reason to use this. Now, as I say, what it does for its points is fine. So maybe in the future when we get more units or we see this unit again in a different army, it might be, completely different because of what it's transporting and so on. But for now, in Solar Auxilia, not such a good unit. The Divisio Aeronautica are bringing 2 planes to support the Solar Auxilia in this book. So the first is the Primaris-Lightning. It's 150 points. It moves 26 inches. That's important, remember, because it's a zoom and flyer, so it has to move 26 inches minimum. It can move up to 52. BS3, armor 11, 11, 10, and 3 hit points. So pretty fragile, but it is a zoom and flyer that you can only snapshot. It deep strikes, of course, and has to enter by deep strike, which means it will take interceptor shots when it turns up on the battlefield. And it's got 2 centerline mounted las cannon. Now, because of the way zoom and flyers move, which has restricted turns and a long minimum movement distance, combine that with centerline mounted guns, it can be quite hard to line these las cannons up. You're probably going to get a shot when the unit first turns up if it doesn't die. Maybe straight away the turn after, but maybe not. You're probably going to get half the turns in the game shooting this gun. Maybe less if the opponent is savvy as well. It's not the easiest gun in the world to use. You can put a ramjet diffraction grid on the Primaris-Lightning as well. Now, these are pretty good. 30 points for +1 armor in your side and rear is a pretty cool thing, really, for the way that vehicles or flyers at least normally get shot at. But it's 30 points, and that's way too expensive on an already quite expensive vehicle. Now, the flavor of these flyers, if you like, is the fact they can take missiles. So remember, a zoom and flyer can only fire 4 weapons maximum. Slightly obscure flyer rule there, but that's what they do. So it's already firing 2 las cannons potentially. You can take up to 3 missile options, and the points you pay are for 2 missiles that are one shot, so bear that in mind. And these are front as well, not center line, so significantly easier to fire. And what that really means is the Primaris-Lightning's like a missile carrier. It can take 3 sets of 2 missiles. Every turn it's going to fire some missiles. You're going to unload these, and even if you can't fire your las cannon, you can just fire more missiles. It's got the option of Sun Fury, which is basically a plasma cannon, a one-shot plasma cannon. 25 points gets you 2 of those. Or Kraken Penetrator, which is basically a multi-melter, but it's just armor bane, doesn't have to be in half range, and that's 35 points. Now, if you could take 3 sets of multi-melter missiles, and maybe every turn you fire the las cannons and 2 of those, or if you can't line up your las cannons, you fire 2 sets of those, and maybe the turn after you fire las cannons and 1, you could definitely get some value out of this vehicle. The problem is their missiles are so expensive. So let's say you go in, Kraken Penetrator, that's 105 points plus the vehicle, so 255 points just to be able to fire what's effectively a couple of multi-melters every turn for a few turns of the game. It's a very fragile vehicle. It might not even get that far. Alternatively, you could just take 1 set of these, but then that would still make it 185 points for 2 multi-melter shots once, and then you're relying on those 2 center-mounted las cannons. So you can see what they were going for with this vehicle, but they've made the missiles too expensive. Realistically, if these were 35 points for all 3 sets of missiles, this would still be an expensive vehicle, but you'd maybe think about taking it. You could maybe do it at that point. It'd be viable, at least, if not great. But at these points cost, they're just outlandish for what it's doing. You've also got to bear in mind, on top of the zooming, making it hard to bring the las cannons to bear, the missiles being expensive, flyers have also got to deal with interceptor as well on top of that. So, although zooming is a great advantage, only being hit on a 6, the advantage that you get from zooming is kind of wiped out by the fact that anything with interceptor gets a free shot, and things with skyfire on top of that interceptor are going to have a good chance of blowing you up. While snapshotting on a 6 does make it hard to hit. 10 las cannons with an augury scanner, 1 or 2 are going to hit you. Very good chance they're just going to blow you up as well on that. So it doesn't really add up to something that is better. It's just different than your average vehicle rather than being flat better. Multiple of these will make them much more survivable though. So if you brought 3 of these on at once, then that would mean that only one of them maybe is taking interceptor shots from that big las cannon unit. The other 2 would be free to do what they want. Now that certainly would make them better, and it'd be pretty cool having an air force to support your troops, but they're not really cheap for what they do anyway. So, taking multiple of them makes their cost issues even worse. So all in all, the Primaris-Lightning, I don't think is really a viable unit, as much as a shame it is, because it's a cool model and adds something different to the army. I just don't really think they're worth taking, even for more casual games. They're just mostly going to disappoint you and make you sad that you spent the money and painted them. Enter the Thunderbolt, which is a slightly different flyer. So this is only 120 points, so 30 points cheaper than the Primaris-Lightning. Moves 22, so 4 inches less, and has an extra point of frontal armor. As well as Deep Strike, it's also got the air superiority rule, so this is the same as the Xiphon. It can start off the board, and if the enemy brings a flyer on, it can react to turn up and shoot the flyer down. It's got 2 centerline mounted las cannon and 4 centerline mounted auto cannon as well. Now again, unusual, a zoom and flyer can only shoot 4 guns. So, realistically, the most of the time you're going to shoot 2 las cannons and 2 auto cannons. You're very rarely going to choose auto cannon 4 times. But there you go. Does feel a little bit like whoever was writing this didn't realise that in giving this all these weapons, but benefit of the doubt there maybe. Ramjet diffraction grid, likewise, just too expensive at 30 points for what it does. If it was 10, 15, you'd maybe consider it. Can take missiles in a slightly different way to the Lightning, so you just choose one option and you get 4 missiles. So Hellstrike missiles are a las cannon, 1-shot las cannon each, and 15 points you get 4. Stark contrast to the Primaris-Lightning, which paid 35 points for 2 multi-melter missiles. So, over 4 times the cost for kind of the same thing, which is a bit weird. You can also take Sky Strike missiles, which are Strength 8, Skyfire, and Sunder for 20 points. Here's another one. Zoom and Flyers get Skyfire if they choose to anyway, so there is no reason to take the Hellstrike missiles, which have got 1 less strength and cost 5 points more over the Hellstrike missiles, because they're just worse. You've already got Skyfire. Again, written by somebody who knows the rules, really difficult to justify. So much like the Primaris-Lightning, zooming makes it really hard to bring weapons to bear on the target, but it does move 4 inches less, so that is actually a benefit, I think, compared to the 26 inches. And obviously this costs a lot less points and is a bit tougher as well. So, missing a round of shooting here and there, plus your rounds of shooting are better because your guns are better, is a lot more bearable with this. And the Hellstrike missiles are excellent. You're probably going to be firing them instead of auto cannons. So if you do line up a shot, you're probably going to fire your 2 las cannons plus 2 of these, which is 4 las cannons. You get to do that twice. And then you're on auto cannons for the rest of the game, or maybe you're dead. But for 15 points, you take those every time. The Sky Strike missiles are okay, but, ultimately pointless because you got Skyfire already. Much like the Primaris-Lightning, taking multiple of these will make them much more survivable. And these are pretty reasonably costed for what they do. And if you do bring 2 or even 3 of them, it's a threat that opponents will maybe struggle to deal with because they might not have that Skyfire. You might bring some vehicles with them and that kind of stuff as well. And because these are a much more reasonable cost and do more for their cost, they're just a better unit. And overall, I think Thunderbolts are great. Definitely worth considering for your support, your heavy fire support in your Auxilia army. So not to belabor this point, but here's a summary of the differences in the Thunderbolt and the Primaris. So the Thunderbolt is 30 points cheaper than the Primaris-Lightning. It's got more guns, so the 4 extra auto cannons, plus 1 frontal armor, and the air superiority rule. It's got lower move, which is an advantage. Arguably, it's the same at worst, but I think it's an advantage. And it's also got missiles that it's very difficult to argue are just better as well. Like, did anyone look at these 2 data sheets? They're literally side by side on 2 pages in the book. Were they written by different people? Were they written by the same person who just did it on a Thursday afternoon and doesn't know how the heresy rules work? I don't know. But as a customer, it's really frustrating, as well as the rules issues with Skyfire and the searchlight on the Arvus lighter. It's really frustrating to see this. Like, we can argue balance between units all we want, and someone somewhere can always say, okay, but that's your opinion. But in this case, it's absolutely cut and dried. There is no contest, not even slightly. It's just frustrating. It's just a poor product. It's bad quality, and it can be better than this, and it should be better than this. So in summary for the fast attack section, well, due to the low troop quality of the army generally, the Arvus lighter is mostly for fun. It's got some synergy with the solar pattern cohort, but even there, it's going to be more interesting than good. The Primaris-Lightning, unshockingly, is completely pointless. The Thunderbolt is great though, and a build with an Air Force style support could be pretty viable and could overwhelm the anti-air defenses of some armies if they've even brought anti-air defenses. But again, between the non-functional searchlights and the terrible flyer versus flyer comparison, this section of the book just really highlights the poor quality of the Libers that have come since the original 2 Space Marine ones. So the Mechanicum one had so many instances of poor writing where it was almost like whoever'd written it had forgotten or didn't understand the rules. It's very much like these books weren't play tested again, certainly not by people who know the rules well enough to be play testing it. We deserve a lot better quality than this, particularly in products like this that are a premium product. The models these rules are for are super premium products in Forge World. Games Workshop, you can do a lot better than this. You really can. And, I would urge you to try a bit harder with these products and at least do the basics of proofreading. I think we deserve that as customers. From a fast attack point of view, though, just going back to the models, Thunderbolts are where it's at. Definitely consider picking some up. And that's the end of the episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please do like and subscribe on YouTube. Leave me any comments down below, any feedback as well. If you want any of that feedback to go to Games Workshop about how disappointing this is, who knows, maybe they'll read the comments. Do join us on Discord too. That's linked in the video description. I'll see you all soon. Bye bye.